Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. If I was starting public domain publishing from scratch today, Leaves of Grass would get my attention pretty quickly. When I checked Project Gutenberg, it had more than 10,000 downloads in the previous 30 days. So there's clearly active interest in this book. Then I went over Amazon and I found an independently published edition of Leaves of Grass sitting at number 64,263 across the entire bookstore. It was also number 13 in one of its philosophy categories, number 29 in poetry about places, and number 40 in nature poetry. So straight away, I've got free demand, I've got paid demand, I've got a famous author, I've got an audience that clearly still exists. And while there is competition, it doesn't look like that endless wall of perfectly positioned editions you get with some of the biggest classics. Honestly, this is looking very good. So would I publish Leaves of Grass as my first public domain book? Almost everything says yes. Now, before I get too excited by the numbers for Leaves of Grass, I want to know why people still care about the book. Because being old and famous isn't enough. Walt Whitman first published Leaves of Grass in 1855 and then kept revising and expanding it throughout his life. It began as a much smaller collection and eventually grew into hundreds of poems. And look at the subjects Whitman writes about: identity, nature, freedom, the human body, individuality, America, life and death. None of those ideas exactly disappeared 100 years ago. They still work with a modern reader. Whitman also moved away from the strict rhyme and rhythm that people expected from poetry at the time. That became part of what made his work so distinctive. So Leaves of Grass isn't surviving just because somebody once decided it was important. People still read it, people still study it, and Walt Whitman is still one of the most recognized names in American poetry. From a reader interest point of view, this one passes very comfortably. Now let's look at the actual demand for Leaves of Grass. When I checked Project Gutenberg, the book had received more than 10,000 downloads during the previous 30 days. That's roughly 340 free downloads every day. So the interest is definitely there. Then I look at Amazon competition, and yes, there are plenty of editions of Leaves of Grass. I'm not going to pretend this is some forgotten book that nobody has discovered. But there's a big difference between having competition and having an overwhelming amount of strong competition. The Amazon results are mixed. Some professionally presented editions, some independently published editions, some very basic reprints, and different publishers are even using different versions of Leaves of Grass. Remember, Whitman kept changing the collection throughout his life, so one publisher might focus on the original 1855 version, while another publishes a much larger later version. That gives you actual product choices, so I've got real demand, proven buyer interest, and a competitive field that still leaves room to think strategically. So at this point, I'm definitely still interested. Then I want proof that an ordinary publisher can actually make sales with Leaves of Grass. And this is where the Amazon numbers become really useful. The independently published edition I checked was ranked number 64,263 across the entire bookstore. It was also number 13 in one of its philosophy categories, number 29 in poetry about places, and number 40 in nature poetry. Now, Amazon rankings move constantly, so that's a snapshot, not some permanent sales report. But a paperback sitting around 64,000 overall is giving us a clear paid demand signal. And this isn't Penguin or Oxford. It's an independently published edition. That's important because now I've got evidence that somebody using Amazon's own publishing platform can enter this market, position Leaves of Grass properly, and actually make sales. Project Gutenberg tells me people still want the text. Amazon tells me some of those people are willing to pay for the right physical edition. So far, Leaves of Grass is still passing. The product potential for Leaves of Grass is strong as well. The independently published edition we're looking at focuses on the original 1855 version and presents it as an illustrated edition. That's already one way of making a deliberate product choice, and there are other directions you could take: a historical introduction, carefully sourced illustrations, Notes around the historical setting, chapter annotations, maybe a reading guide, but I wouldn't go crazy with it. The customer is searching for Walt Whitman. So Walt Whitman's poetry still needs to remain the center of the product. And legally, this looks excellent too. Whitman died in 1892. The work was written in English. There's no translator adding another rights layer. So under the conservative territory checks we use, the original work is comfortably public domain. So let's take a look. Demand, yes. Paid demand? Yes. Rights? Yes. Product potential? Definitely. Honestly, at this point, Leaves of Grass looks like it should be an easy yes, but there's still one check left, and that's where I stop. Here's the problem with Leaves of Grass. It's poetry, and formatting poetry properly is a completely different job from formatting a normal novel. Look through Leaves of Grass and you'll see multiple heading levels, poem titles, section titles, numbered sections, different amounts of white space, indented lines, short lines, very long lines, and some of Whitman's lines are really long. Now, with ordinary prose, if a sentence naturally wraps onto the next line, nobody cares. But with poetry, that line break can be part of the work. Change it accidentally, and you may change the rhythm, the appearance, or even the way the reader understands the poem. Then you've got italics, spacing, page breaks, heading placement, margins, and potentially more specialized layouts depending on the edition you're creating. Everything needs to look deliberate. So Leaves of Grass isn't difficult because the book itself is weak, quite the opposite. The problem is that the manuscript punishes careless formatting, and if this is the first book you've ever formatted, that's not where I'd choose to learn. So, would I publish Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman as my first public domain book? My verdict is no. And this is one of those frustrating ones because the book itself has done almost nothing wrong. The Gutenberg demand is there, the Amazon sales evidence is there. An independently published edition was sitting at number 64,263 in books when I checked. The rights are clean, the author is famous, the themes still work, the competition is workable, and there's plenty of room to create a valuable edition. Would I publish Leaves of Grass with experience? Absolutely. But as my very first public domain book, no. Because when you're still learning trim sizes, margins, heading styles, line spacing, page breaks, and interior design, poetry is unforgiving. One badly wrapped line can change the presentation of the actual work. So I'd start with something structurally simpler, learn the publishing process, build your formatting skills, then come back to Leaves of Grass when you can actually do the book justice. So my verdict is excellent book, excellent opportunity, but wrong first manuscript. Sometimes the opportunity is ready before the publisher is.